Hello everybody and welcome to Organian's Puzzle Box. In this tutorial we'll be making a nebula in Blender. This is a volumetric effect, so it's not actually geometry or anything like that. It's just a volumetric effect within Blender, so you can't really replicate it in another program like to be able to export it out of Blender just like that and put it into another program like Unreal Engine and use it. But on the other hand, you can create some very nice renders in Blender and then be able to export those as MPG4 files, so a video format, and bring it, for example, in Unreal Engine, project it on a mesh, and then have this nebula within, in the background somewhere playing as an animation loop, which would look quite nice. So that's very much possible. So this tutorial really goes in depth of how to create this node structure to put the nebula together. I think you'll have to bear with me. It's kind of a long one, but there's a lot of nodes to put together in order to get the effect that you want. The project file will be in the description below if you want it. If you really, you want to skip over a lot of of putting this tutorial together, you can just get a project file. Now I have added comments within the shader that will help you with this project file specifically. Will help you to immediately sort of understand what sort of each segment, each category does. So let's not waste any more time and let's begin the tutorial, as I'm sure you are all very excited to make your own nebula in Blender. Okay, this doesn't happen very often, but we're not going to delete the default cube this time around. Okay, so the default cube is safe, which is amazing. We're going to use this as our basis to build the volume for the nebula. The volume domain, if you like it. So the first thing we want to do is with the cube selected, we want to go to its material. If you don't have a material, make a material, maybe rename it to nebula, that's fine. And then you're not really going to do much into the cube, with the cube itself. You may want to press the camera button and I've got walk navigation on my shortcut, but anyway, just basically bring the camera over to look at the cube. Let me just try and really set it like this, something like that. Yeah. Again, the camera is not really that important at the minute, but if you want to keep your sort of scene in view, this is what you can do. And then just make sure over in here you switch over to shaded mode, to viewport shading. But this is an Eevee, by the way, so there's no real problem with you can keep it in Eevee with no real problem. You don't have to switch to cycles or anything like that, just leave it as Eevee. Okay, and over onto this main viewport, we're going to switch over to a shader editor, and this is where we have our materials. Now, we're not going to use the surface at all because we're going to work with the volume part of things. So we're going to delete our principal BSDF node, and we're going to start building the nodes for driving this nebula. So a lot of this is revolving around noise textures. So I'm going to press Shift-A on the keyboard and actually bring a noise texture within the scene. And we want to create the shape inside of the cube where, how a nebula has all these sort of gassy looking clouds. That's what basically it is. A nebula is a lot of gases in space. And what we're going to do, we're going to have to create a noise texture with color ramps that just brings in, has a lot of different variations of color within that noise. Some of them are visible and some of them aren't, so we just create this sort of depth through the cube itself. So with the noise texture over in here, we're not going to change any of these parameters as of yet. But we do want to add a mix RGB node, and we're going to leave the clamp to, we're going to leave the factor to 0 for now on this one. And I'm going to add a mapping node, and then we need to connect something within the vector. So I'm going to bring in a texture coordinate. Generally, this is what's sorry, texture coordinate, there we go. This is what you normally put into here. So we want to use the generated, not UV or normal or anything like that. We're just going to use the generated information. Leave it to point. Again, don't play with any of these settings, but we definitely want to mix between this noise texture and the FAC of the noise texture, and we're just going to leave it like that. Now we can copy and paste the noise texture because we're going to use another one. And again, these noise textures are going to be duplicated quite a few times. We also want to bring the mapping and the texture coordinate over from here, you know, just a new set basically, and we want to put this into the vector of the noise texture, and this is what's going to drive our noise within the cube, and you'll see what I mean when we get to that point. Let's just bring a color ramp, and this color ramp, we'll leave it as a black and white, but just leave it at linear, and maybe bring this a bit further, you know, a bit further in like that. And we're going to connect the FAC over here in our color ramp, and then we want to bring a map range, and we're going to put the FAC of the noise texture. So we're not using any other information. Well, we're using obviously these, but the value is going to come from the noise texture. And we can then copy this mix. Sorry, not this one, this one. We can copy paste this mix node, bring it over here. We don't want it as a divide. We want it to be, sorry about that. We want it to be as mix, not as divide. We can put this in color 2, and then this map range, we'll put it in color 1. Just make sure you don't get lost within all of these nodes. With this done, we want to bring in another noise texture. So we're going to put this over here. And again, this mix is going to go into the scale of this noise texture. And the mixture that we did earlier over up here is going to go into the vector of this noise texture. We can bring our material output a bit further away because we're going to need to add a lot more nodes. And let's just copy the ramp. And we're going to copy it 3 times like this. And I'm going to show you what each of these will do when we get there, when we get to that point. We do want to, for the first color ramp up here, we do want to invert our sort of, well, this noise texture FAC, we want to invert it. So the way we do that, we are going to look for an invert node and just put it over here, bring in the FAC into the color, and then this color into the FAC of the color ramp. We want to add another point over in here and just bring it as close to this one as possible. I just create this sort of a sharp gradient there. Maybe position 4.2. Oh, sorry, that's not what I meant. Yeah, I think that's going to be okay. Then in this particular one over here, we'll bring this further a bit, but we're just going to have to play with these settings when we get there, really. But this FAC goes into each of these. By the way, if you select the noise texture and then select the color ramp, and you have the Node Wrangler add-on, you can then press F key on the keyboard and it connects them automatically. Actually, this one, we don't want to connect it directly to the noise texture. We want to bring a Musgrave texture in between them, and that's going to give us more of a break through the volume as we go through it. So let me just add this FAC over into the vector, and then this Musgrave height information over into the FAC over here. Okay, and now I'm going to take another mix. That's why, I like to copy and paste the same ones over and over again. So I've got this mix over here, which I'm going to connect the color of the color ramp into color number 2. And then the mix node itself, I'm going to change it over to a multiply instead. And I'm going to copy it again. Let me just put my material output further away as I need even more space for this. So I've got my multiply over here. I'm going to connect this into color 1. And I need something in color 2. So that's where I'm going to use this other color ramp. Let me just copy and paste another mix node. Connect the color to color 1. change this over into an add. We're trying to add the value with an invert. So we're adding the inverted value. Sorry, I've got a mixed node. Okay, an invert. I've just copied by mistake a couple of things. Right, so then copy the invert over and bring it over in color 2 over here. This multiply, we'll need it further down further down. Now, this is the point where we want to create our color for our actual color. So until this point, we've just been using gradients to decide where the textures are going to be, you know, visible and where they aren't going to be visible. But now we're going to add a gradient that's going to define the color of our nebula. So let's copy another color ramp. God, honestly, I said color ramp so many times now. Put our add into this color ramp over here, and I'm going to change to a cardinal. Let's try a cardinal, and the color of this, I am going to make it, I don't know, a red like this. Again, the colors can be changed later on. So let me just add another point, bring it over here, and another point. So this is just like a type of a gradient sort of thing. What I'm thinking, I'll switch this to this red, and then this white, I'll make it maybe into a yellowish color. Something like that. We'll see how this looks like. Maybe we want to change them later on. I mean, it really depends because, for example, the darker color is going to show up in so you might want to invert this color because you may actually need the darker colors to be in the center rather than on the extremities. But we'll see when we get there. Okay, so now this color ramp, we need to clamp its values. So I'm just going to add a clamp node over here, plug in the color into the value, leave this the way it is right now. We've got a multiply node over here, which is great. We can bring the result over into color 1. We'll need another black and white color ramp over here. And we're also going to need another Musgrave. Sorry, I think I've copied that. Right, I need another Musgrave node over here. I'm just going to put it into our FAC. Okay, and this color ramp can then connect over into the FAC up here. I keep saying FAC, but... right, okay. So that's connected. And now we want to add... another math node. Let me just add in a math node here at the end. We'll put this as a multiply, and we'll leave it as a value of 1. And we want to connect this add over into this value. And now we're just going to have to add a principled volume. Okay. This multiply we're going to put into our density. This multiply we're going to put into our color. And this multiply we're going to put it into our emission strength. And this is going to be our emission color. Now bear in mind that the nebula will be using the emission color to show us the result. So now we're just going to put that into the volume. And this is going to load a little bit in here. We're not really seeing anything as of yet because we've got values basically to start changing. So now it's time to change some of the settings. But the first thing that I want to do is, as you can see, we're not really noticing anything in our body here. So what I want to do is I want to select my light, bring it over into the center of the world, and bring it down within the volume. And as you can see, there's something in there, but it's just not right. So we're going to have to play around with the settings to try and get this to show properly. So the first thing, we can go back to the beginning where we've got our sort of values for our noise textures. And let's change the value for this, for the scale to 2. So I've already got some numbers in here that we can use. So that's going to be a 0.2. And then we want, we've got to a location sort of. This is, by the way, this is going to allow us to move the volume within the scene. So I'm gonna put this at 50. Gonna put this at 100, and sort of on the z-axis, let's try 14, and then rotation 180. The Y rotation to 200 and the Z rotation to 10. We're going to leave the scale at 1. That's not really a problem. Now over onto this mapping over here, we can leave all of these to 0, but then the scale of the noise texture down here, we're going to put it to 8, and then this is 16, and this. So basically we're going to have the same sort of values as we did previously. Okay, and now this is where they both sort of unite. So I want to do like a factor of 0.2 between this sort of value here, and I also want to add another point in here and just make this gradient. Oh, sorry about that. Just make this gradient a lot sharper, and switch it over to a white. Like that, you can see the gradient now as I switch it over to a white. And now this noise texture from here, we want to switch this to 16, and that's about it really in that respect. The Musgrave texture that we've used down here, we'll leave it as 3D and FBM, but then 15 for the scale. I think I've got a problem here. I think I need to clamp this. So let me just add a clamp node. So just dropping it there, as you can see, it's already sort of gone into full effect. Then I'm going to change this. Maybe let me just try. Yeah, I'm going to try to a B spline. And as you can see, it's already starting to show something in there now. Just because I clamped it, so I'm just gonna bring this value a bit further. Yeah, you can see that's the noise in the Musgrave. Now, if we don't have a clamp anymore, this is probably not gonna look, well, still okay even without a clamp. But let's just make sure that we're clamping this value between 0 and 1. I don't want it to go any further than that. Okay, and then we'll leave the other, this clamp to 0 to 1 as well. Although I'm not really sure if it does anything. It might be that because we have a clamp before that and then one after, it might not actually have any real effect. Right, okay, so then we have another Musgrave texture over in here, and we can change this to 100. And then this particular sort of, this color ramp, we're gonna bring it further, well, something like that. I think that'll be fine. This entire sort of thing then feeds into a multiply. 1 second. Let me just, this should go in here, right? And then the value should be 1 for this multiply. No, wait 1 second now. I think that was okay with the fact. Yeah, that was okay. It's just the color in here. I'll have to switch this color to a black, and we can leave that as it is. Okay. So now over into the color. I think this add over here is not correctly set up. I think it's 0.0, so it should be a 0.05. And then the color itself, we need to switch that over into a white. And go for sort of a full white in here. Like that. And then the color over here, let's just try 0.5 and go for a different kind of tint, maybe a bluish tint, like that. And then this invert, actually, let me just try and put it into the FAC over here. And then this color, we can switch it to something else. Something like that. And instead of a multiply, we'll do a mix over in here, and let's see what we're getting. Now, one thing that we haven't done is we haven't actually improved our volumetric sort of quality. As you can see, this is very, very low. So I'm gonna go to the over into this panel over here where we've got these settings, and I'm going to increase the start level of our volume to 5 meters, and then the end to, let's say, about 50. And then I'm going to change the tile size to 2 pixels, and we're switching to 128 samples, so that looks a lot better. I'm also going to make the cube larger. So the cube is at dimensions of 2, so let's just try 10. Yeah. Okay, so now you can see sort of how this looks like inside of the cube. Yeah. We're gonna add some volumetric shadows. That's going to build up the scene a bit more. So as you can see, when I click volumetric shadows already, you're seeing some improvements. We'll leave the sample at 16. And let me just take this light. As you can see, when I move it, some other effects are sort of inbound. Let me just go on the camera again. And walk navigation, let's just go backwards a bit. We can stay within the scene. One thing that I like to do about my camera is you do have this option in here where it says pass part out. So if you increase this, it just blackens out anything that you're not seeing, which would then help with the scene itself. Okay. So now we're just going to have to play around more with these settings and then add another branch to our nebula to make it more convincing. So toying around with the settings, on the Musgrave texture over in here, this is, we can switch this over to a B-spline. And what you'll notice now is that if we take this gradient over here, this makes it visible or invisible. I can bring it like, actually no, I can do this, you know, just bring this value over here and just bring this one sort of like that. And also I'm going to really darken these sort of colors over here. So in essence, it's really, you know, it's really bringing the colors down, but I'm going to switch it over to a B-spline instead. So we're going to do something like that, maybe a bit white, a bit more, you know, like that. Let's just switch the colors over to something more manageable. Yeah, something like that. And I think this top color here to a blue. Now, why are these colors important? You know, like the blue over there that we just played around with. Well, one of the things to take note of is that what's going to happen is when we're adding more lights within the nebula. So I'll show you just in a second. So if we take this particular light that we added here and we duplicate it, you can see that all the light within the volume is going to have that type of color. And then you can go in here and you know, for example, change the light itself to something else if you want to. But this is how the light, the white light, is being sort of shown within the volume itself of our the settings that we put together. So this is how we will look like. Let me just try and deactivate. Actually, I can't even see them. So now we can go over into here Actually, no, we can bring this over like that. This setting. It's a bit confusing when you look at it because there's so many different sort of you know, changes that we're making. So you can increase sort of the nebula effect by just doing this, or you see what I mean? This color ramp here will decide how much of the nebula is actually visible. So something like that. One other thing that we can do is we can change the world material. For example, we can make it all black, and we can deactivate, you know, we can do it like this to be able to see it a bit better. But there's something about the world that we could change, as you know, the material itself. So we could add a noise texture, sorry, not a white noise, but a noise texture. And then we can connect this to a color ramp. And then we can connect this to a mix RGB. So this goes into our background. The color ramp goes into one of the colors of the mix shader, and then the fact of the noise texture goes into here, into the color ramp. We can put this at maybe 1. We'll do 116, and that should be fine. And then let's just bring this sort of color ramp like that. Switch it over to a B-spline, and then the color itself, I don't know, we can select the blue or whatever. So we'll leave it at strength of 1. But then we'll multiply between the two colors. Like that. I'm not really sure what's happened here with the background, why it's become grayed out. I'm just gonna delete that and just add another background. I think I may have deactivated it somehow. Okay, and now I've connected this to the surface, and you can see what sort of effect we're getting within that. Maybe switch this over to, you know, a color like that, make it quite dark. Select the camera again, move further behind, but we still got some more work on the shape itself now that we need to do. And now for the sort of final changes to this part of it, into our map range over here. So this is at the start where the texture coordinate was. We want to change this to 4.8, which is going to create more of a diversity within our map range. So this entire branch connects to the emission strength and where it will show up. And then we want to go to this Musgrave texture over here. Start decreasing this. Maybe let's try a 10. Let's go to a 5. So nothing really changes, but if we switch over these colors like this, you can now sort of see what's going on. So we're breaking it more. Maybe something like that. Okay. So now we're within the nebula. One thing to also note is that the colors here are very important to what type of how this whole thing will look like. So you may want to maybe switch over to a blue, and then switch this over to a blue as well. And then this color, we could change it. No, let's just leave it quite light. I'm not really good with picking colors today, I must be honest. So maybe something like that, and then we'll darken these values. Let me just try now. Cardinal is not we switch to constant, then it's not going to look very nice at all. So I think this probably needs to go further down, something like that. Okay. So then it's all really up to experimentation. So this is going to, give us the sort of the strength of the actual colors within the nebula. So I don't think strong colors like that will be very good unless you want to. I mean, you can have multiple light sources in there. This is going to sort of, as you can see, this adds this sort of darkened sort of area to it. So you may want to play around with the density of this until you get sort of like the effect that you want. Maybe something like this. Yeah. And then when you add more lights, then those lights are going to change the scene a bit more. Just make sure that if you want to make it blue, then the light is no longer going to be visible. So it's going to have to be something else on the spectrum because the density is sort of canceling it. But now we want to switch over to the next branch of this nebula to fully finish off the effects. So I'm going to add a shader over in here, and I'm going to make a new shader connection further down below. Let me just switch over back into the camera. Oh, and before I forget, I don't like the fact that it's not breaking up too much, so I'm going to go over to this color ramp here between the two clamps, and I'm going to bring the values further like that. Now the problem is that our density is very high, so I'm just going to decrease that maybe to 1, and maybe go to our world and make this a bit brighter. Yeah, something like that. And as you can see, we've got like this sort of, oh, and actually let me just increase the cube to, make it bigger, so it looks more, better when we're sort of like inside of it. Like that. And if I go back to the object, then as I said, we can play around with the density of it, which then, now I'll leave it to 1, but then I can play, as I said, we can play with the color ramp over here between the two clamps and just get a sort of a better looking result. And then you can just play around with the nodes. So for example, if you don't like the shape of it, you can change in here the location, rotation. So this will give you some form of control over how the nebula looks like, and you can also animate these nodes, which is quite nice. So we'll leave it like that. And now let's just add the next nodes, which is going to be for about, just creating sort of star shapes and other things within the system. And we're going to use as a basis a Voronoi texture. So let me just bring in a Voronoi texture, copy a color ramp over here, and we can connect the distance of the Voronoi texture to the fact of this color ramp. And I'm going to make it quite, the gradients to be quite sharp. And I'm going to take the texture coordinate and this mapping from here. Well, I'm trying to at least. There we go. Copy paste. Would have been easier if I would have just created new ones. Okay, and let's just add another, not white noise. I want to add a noise texture in here. Then copy the mapping and texture coordinate again. I don't know why copy and paste for Blender seems to be such a difficult thing to do properly. It requires me to do it a couple of times. Right, so the mapping node connects over into the vector of the Voronoi texture. This mapping node connects to the vector of the noise texture. We're not going to play around with the settings just yet. we want to bring in another color ramp in here and connect the fact of the noise texture over, and then add the mix RGB between these two color ramps that we just created. Then we want to add another color ramp over here with a Musgrave texture. So the height of the Musgrave texture connects into the color ramp. We'll multiply this mix node, and so we're going to change this to a multiply. I'm going to change this to a multiply as well, and connect color 1 over here, and then the color of this color ramp over here. Okay. Now we want to do this texture coordinate from this level. So we've got another color ramp that we need to bring over here, and the Voronoi distance connects to the FAC. We'll take this texture, well, we'll take another texture coordinate and a mapping node over here. We want to mix between a noise and a Voronoi. So let me just bring another noise. Sorry. Put a vector into the noise texture. Get another color ramp. Get the FAC of this noise texture into the color ramp. And then we want to mix RGB between these two color ramps. Add another color ramp with a Musgrave texture and connect over into the FAC with another multiply. So the color of this multiply goes into slot 1. This color ramp goes into slot 2. Multiply this. Copy and paste the mix RGB. We're just going to put this into multiply. Both of them just needs to be multiply. Actually, the third one, we'll put that into a multiply as well. The color of this goes into here. We do want a value over to be added into color 2, so a value of 0, a very small value, 0.001 should be just fine. And all of these, by the way, will connect into another principal's volume, so we need that in here anyway. Okay, and let's just copy this twice, but we'll switch one to an add. Connect the color over in here. This multiply needs to go into color 1, and we'll want another value, not a volume info. I wanted to say value, right? Value at 0.001, and we'll connect this into color 2 with a FAC of 1 here as well. This add node goes into our density. By the way, this principal volume obviously will have to connect it with the add shader that we made earlier. My noodles don't look very well. I'm just going to add another add node, this one over here. This is going to be our emission strength, our emission color, not strength. And in this color, we want to add this multiply in color 1. And then this color from here can go into color 2. And then this multiply goes all the way up here into this color. Something like that. And so far we're not really seeing anything because none of these nodes have yet to be, their sort of ramps the color ramps have not yet been changed. So we'll leave this one where, the way it is. The next color ramp down here, we're gonna put a white value over here, and we're just gonna bring our dark value further towards the middle. The Voronoi that we added over here, we want to change this to a 4D, so it goes in 4 dimensions rather than just 3D. So you've got we can leave it as Euclidean and then put this as 13.300 as a value. We'll put the scale to something quite large, so 20,000. No, sorry, we'll make it 20. So this noise texture, we can put this over to a value of scale of 10, detail is 16, roughness is 0.5, that's fine. We'll leave this color ramp, we just set it up earlier. We can put this multiplied to 1. The next multiply, we'll put that to 1 as well. This color ramp from here that's connected to the Musgrave, we can put that to 100. Detailed 2, that's fine, yeah. Dimensional luminosity. I'm just going to bring the color ramp value to something like that. Okay. All this needs to be done properly here. And now we can go further down here where we've got this color ramp and this Voronoi texture. And we can leave this as a 3D, but we do have to increase its scale to 120. And then the color ramp where it's connecting, let's just switch between these two. Okay. The noise texture down here, we're just gonna have to put a detail to 16. Sorry, detail to... I'm trying to do a detail to 16 and it won't let me. Right, 0.5. Let's just do 3.9 here on mapping coordinates. And then increase this, well, increase the black gradient on this color ramp, bring it sort of further into the middle. Do this scale at 100 for this Musgrave texture. And then bring these values like that. First multiply, put it at a factor of 1. Second one, same thing. Third one to 1 as well. Okay. Now the emission strength, this is going to start, you know, we'll be able to see what these nodes will do. So let's just put that to a number 3. And you can see them in there sort of, I don't know if YouTube compression allows it, but you can see them in there. Let me just make this a bit bigger. You can see these streaks, these points everywhere. So now we just need to play around with the scale a bit more to make them bigger. So to make these bigger, we can use this Musgrave texture over here. We can play with this slider, which makes them obviously, well, makes them more visible. And then the scale, if we go to a low scale of, let's say, well, you don't want to do 1, but let's say you go for the 25, you can now see them within the scene. So as you're moving around into the volume, you can see them in there. So I'm just going to make them be a bit more visible, like that. And these could be passed around as, like I said, like stars, for example. One thing that we can also do now is we've got this emission strength, so we could put this to 10, for example, which just makes them a lot more, you know, visible. You can go to, you know, a lot higher values if you want to, but I would definitely not recommend going to, you know, to those values. So we're just going to leave it at 5 for now. What we can do is generate some more lights. Maybe go for 2000 and then switch over to, I don't know, a green light. And you can see that it's just affecting that entire sort of area. and I think the radius, yeah, the radius is not going to help me because it obviously, but you can do, you know, you can do 5,000, and then you can bring some more up here. So the lights will definitely help with further enhancing the scene. So let's just say we'll go for 10,000, and maybe the color will be, you know, a very powerful red, but maybe red near red isn't going to work very well, so maybe a yellowish kind of thing. Let me just put my camera to a bit of a better position, something like that. Just made the scene a lot bigger just for you guys to be able to see it. But yeah, I think these stars will probably have to make them smaller. I think they're just too big at 0. You know, that color, that sort of level. I'm just gonna leave the camera where it was. Performance, by the way, is obviously very dependent on how many tiles you give for each of the actual you know, for the volumetric tile sizes. This is really the node that just, you know, has created everything, has pretty much given us the power to make the scene. So I think a 0.5 there might be better. Something like that. Can obviously make the cube even larger if you want to, so maybe go for a 50. But then as you go larger, so does the performance start to decrease a bit more. And you've also got to make sure that the you know, the level that, see, with a smaller volume, you get more performance within the scene. So you really got to work out how you're going to put these in, or where, or how, or, you know, this is part of that. So as an example, this is an example for the scene. As you can see, I can still move through it, but you can play around with the coloring, change it however you want, and just make it look a lot different. So it's just all these sliders do so many different things, and you're just gonna have to experiment with them until you get the right combination of what you want. But that's about it really on setting up the nebula inside Blender.